Hello everyone, welcome back. So today we are starting with the Government of India Act 1858. So in 1857, Indian Mutiny took place, which is also known as Sepoy War or the Great Revolt or the First War of Independence. Revolt, though the revolt was suppressed, but its effect was very much impressive. It drove the last nail into the coffin of the Mughal Empire, and the dust of the hope of the Maratha revival was dust. It dusted basically it dusted the hope of the Maratha revival. So, but overall, it exposed the glaring deficiencies of the company administration means rule. The sentence means that though the revolt was suppressed upon, but it highlighted the deficiencies, कमियां जो कि ब्रिटिश सरकार ब्रिटिश सॉरी कंपनी के रूल में रह गई थी. It's led to company conversion to crown. An act of 1858 was act passed in 1858, also known as Act of Better Government of India. And the factors responsible for the passing of the Act of 1858 are: number one, the revolt of the 1857, as we started with the topic, which was the revolt. So basically, the main factor responsible for the Act of 1858 was revolt of 1857, which is also first war of independence. So basically, what happened is that after widespread rebellion, the inefficiency of the East India Company was exposed to the British crown, and also the British saw revolt as the major governance failures and decided to bring direct crown rule. Basically, the British crown were trying to bring these rules from very early, but as the rule was of the company and everything was little bit going well, so before 1857 revolt there was no excuse or there was no reason for the crown to implement its rule. So after 1857 revolts, the British crown gets the reason, and they came up with the act of 1858, which come through the in a way of Queen's proclamation, which we will see in later, where Queen talked about the suppression of the revolts and all. So let's see what was the second factor uh, responsible for the passing of the Act 1858. So number second was the failure of the East India Company rules. As you can see, corruption and mismanagement created dissatisfaction. We all are well aware that during this company's rule, there was a lot of corruptions and mismanagements going on. So people were unhappy there. So it's resulted in the 1857 revolts. Policies like doctrine of lapse. So what is the doctrine of lapse? Doctrine of lapse was that when a king or a queen dies without its hair, when a kingdom ruler dies without its hair, then it was got captured by the Britishers. So basically the same thing. See, as you can remember from the very historical events of Rani Lakshmi Bai, who adopted a son, but due to doctrine of lapse, the British rulers were not accepting those accepting that son as legal heir of that kingdom. So and they wanted to capture Rani Lakshmi Bai kingdom. So I think you must have related to this doctrine of lapse. And aggressive expansion angered Indian rules. Also, other cause was that aggressive expansions that were British doing of its territories. Also, harsh land revenue policies like the permanent settlement leads to the peasant distress. Basically, what we known by the harsh land and permanent settlements. Basically, it was that permanent settlement. Our earlier, as you can see in the histories, our earlier people or main dwellers of the Indians were they used to do. Uh, slash and burn plantings, and they moved from forest to forest, clearing the first they clear the lands after burning it, and after that they used to grow crops, and for the next season they lived that place and moved to the another place. But after the arrival of the East India companies, they found it very difficult to gain control on those peoples who were slash and burns planters. So they forced to do permanent settlements, and also the land revenues that were charged were very high. Number third reason for the factor number third factor responsible for the passing of Act of 1858 is discontent among Indians. As you can see, also the religious and social policies such as introduction of the infield rifle cartridge greased with animal fat offended both Hindus and Muslim. You must be popularly aware of this infield rifle cartridge greased with animal fats. Basically, it was a type of a gun, a rifle, which was cartridge was made up of animal fats, and they needs to tear those fats by using mouth, and then put on the rifles, and have to for charge it or open fires, etc. So basically this was no as you can see, Hindus are the gods, lovers. They pray every animals, then they used to pray every animals and trees. So it was very hard for them, and for their religious beliefs to tear those fats, animal fats with the mouth. And also Muslims were disangered with this thing. Also, discrimination against Indian soldiers and lack of promotion in the British Army created unrest. Basically, it was that promotions was not given to the Indian soldiers, and they were discriminated against the British soldiers. So this also leads to the wider spread angers in among Indians, and discontent increased. Also, the British public and political pressures was also there, which increased the discontent. The horrific violence during the 1857 revolt shocked British politicians and the public. Parliament lost confidence in the East India Company ability to govern India. So basically, after the revolt, the parliament has lost confidence in the East India Company ability, and also British newspapers and politicians demanded direct ground control for the better administration. After the revolt, after the revolts, it was by the most of the Britishans and the politicians, it was demanded that the India should be officially colonized, and it should be under the British control, so that better administration can be carried out. Also, need for a strong centralized administration. Centralized means that of the central. So basically, here the centralized administration means British Crown administration. Administration means again which is rule. So the Act of 1858 introduced the Secretary of State for India and the Viceroy, ensuring more distressed British governance. So basically, the two main figure of the controlling the two main figure which played important roles for the next 60 year after the coming of the 1858 act in the controlling of that's India territories. Number one is Secretary of a State, and the second one is Viceroy. So basically, Secretary of a State is the main. Basically, you can say that he was he was the member of the parliaments, and he was superior to Viceroy, and Viceroy though gave advice to the secretary using the councils, as we will read later, that it was the of the 15 member councils which used to advise secretary of the state. But secretary of a state had the power to veto those advices. Veto means basically you can say that type of disagreements on that those advice in case of critical situations, so that so that British could ensure good and well governance. So basically, established British crown rule. Queen Victoria. was then the queen was the British or queen was then Victoria, of which ruled from 1837 to 1901, and the prime minister during the act of 1858 was Edward Smith Stanley, who ruled from 1858 to 1859. And let's see about what was the UK political situation in 1858. So basically, the Conservative Party was in power but had a weak majority. Basically, at that time, Conservative power was in party. Conservative Party was in power, but had a weak majority. Main opposition was Liberal Party, and it was led by the Palmerston. The government focused on stabilizing British rule in India after the 1857 rules. But this thought of the British government, that is of the stabilizing British rule, it's paved the way for the India for the its own governance, means self governance by the Indians. So basically, it led the way for the creation of Indian on self-governance and the British removal from the our territory. So the main provision of the 1858 Act was number one is end of the East India Company rule. As we know, after the 1858 East India Company rule was removed, and its main leaders were uh, given made the members of the councils, which used to advise secretary of the state. So the company board of control and the directors was abolished, and establishment of the secretary of a state of India, which we have seen now. New office, secretary of a state for India, was created to oversee Indian affairs. The secretary was a member of the British cabinet and was directly responsible to Parliament. As I said earlier, that he was directly responsible to the Parliament, and he was the member of the British cabinet. Later we will also see what were the differences in the power between the secretary and the viceroy. So for now, remember that secretary was responsible to the parliaments and was a member of the British cabinet. He was assisted by a council of India of 15 members, mostly from former East India Company officials. So as I said you, he was advised by the councils of India, and basically these members, councils members, were from chosen from East India Company official, so that the officials, officials of the company which were at higher positions, do not feel sometimes like of denials. It's like politics. You can see that's politics. They were given the power so that they may not revolt against, or they may not take action against the British crown. Now, number third provision was the creation of position of Viceroy of India, and we know that Viceroy used to act under the Secretary of State, and the first Viceroy was Lord Canning. So let's see. The Governor General of India was given the new title of Viceroy, representing the British Crown, basically. So the thing is that in the power was almost the same, and the state of Governor General of India, which was given by the British company, sorry, East India Company, was changed. Just the name was changed to Viceroy. And as we know, Lord Canning became the first Viceroy of India in 1858, and through the Lord Canning only, the proclamation of this Queen was declared in India. So basically, the Viceroy had full authority over Indian administration, but follow order from the British government. Here he used to follow order from the British government, but and the secretary was directly responsible to the Parliament and was the member of the British cabinet. Okay, and the Viceroy had both executive and legislative power. Executive, I am sure that you must be knowing about the executives and the legislatives, so there is no need of a discussion. Mm, But for easy reference, let's have a one line statement: executive, which executes this law, and the legislative, which creates the law. So basically, he oversees the administration of India, including law and order, revenue collection, and infrastructure. Also, reported directly to the Secretary of State of India. And number fourth provision of this act is that decentralization of power to local rulers. The one of the major things which helped in British over helped Britishers for over next 15 to sorry 60 years, 50 to 60 years, to maintain those decorums, silence in the that's Indian territory, Indian colony. So basically, local rulers were assured Indian rulers and princes that their territories would not be annexed arbitrarily. Annexed means captured, means उनके राज्य पे बलजोबरी कब्जा नहीं किया जाएगा. And the controversial doctrine of lapse was abolished, which was the main factor which helped British crown to sustain in India, and which helped to basically minimize the angers between the Indians against the British rule. So basically, the commitment to and social neutrality. Also, in the provision, religious and social neutrality was promised by the Queen, and the promise was that it would never interfere in Indian religious and social custom. Also, this was an attempt to calm the tension. As I said you, it was an attempt to calm the tension after the revolt of 1857, where religious concerns played a big role. Number sixth provision was a strengthening of the British military in India. Basically, after the revolts, British took proactive actions, and they increased the numbers of the European soldiers as compared to the Indian soldiers, so that further this type of situation do not take place. And the ratio of the British to India soldiers was increased to prevent future revolts, and the British made sure that key military positions were always held by the Europeans, so that further such type of revolts do not take place. Also, royal proclamation was in the provision, and it was to be made by the Governor General of India, which is Viceroy, and at that time that was Lord Canning, on the behalf of the Queen, especially organized darbar in Allahabad, November 1, 1858. So you should remember these things, that the proclamation was organized in Darbar of Allahabad, and it took place on November 1, 1858. Also, the proclamation was drafted according to the wishes of the Queen. So for now, let's stop here, and in the next video we will start with the power of the Secretary of the States, and we'll also cover the significance of the Government of India Act 1858, and we will read Queen proclamations in the details. So for now, let's stop here, and our topic has stopped here, and thank you.